Somebody who has a gun will hopefully shoot and not your foot. So this ranch, I just recently, about 4 months ago, had the Patterson, descendants of the Patterson, come, and they've been traveling around trying to do the journey that you guys have been doing for quite a few years. And they asked me, I never knew this as the Patterson Ranch. It was the Wynn Conley Ranch when I was out here. Well, lo and behold, it was the Patterson Ranch before that. And they had pictures of the home for which we will walk up there. Yay, thank you. A backup is always helpful.
You got two.
So they showed up and we went on a tour of this ranch, and they had pictures of when the house was being built in 1915 by her grandmother, and it was a craftsman home. Now, who would have thought Fish Lake Valley would bring a craftsman home here? Those aren't cheap. And so, you know, 103 years later, it's still standing. It is in disarray because it has not been inhabited for probably 30 years that I know. I grew up with this ranch being a functioning cattle ranch. We held our 4-H events out here. We learned how to do our show animals out here. We would have mock fairs where we would have to show our animals and be judged, but it would be a community event, and so the women would show up with all kinds of potluck stuff, and the men would show up with all their livestock tools that us kids would need to learn how to use. If we were doing sheep, the carding tools and stuff like that. And so it was an all-day thing. And the new buildings here with the red roofs on them were added later after it changed hands from Mr. Conley. And that became the bunkhouse over there. And I think that's cook's quarters and stuff like that. So wander around a little bit if you want, and you can kind of go right in through this little gate right here and at least peek in to the circular arena. So that was most likely, they couldn't remember, but that was most likely for training horses, circular. Of course, everything being rock walled, we are a valley of tons of boulders. So you utilize the things you have. The Dorcas Women's Club was actually built by women in 1929, made of rammed earth, where they dug the soil, mixed it with sticks and sagebrush and clays, and then they would do a row of forms, pour it in, tamp it down, hauling the buckets from the desert, and let it cure, and then come back and tear those forms off and start the next row. So a lot of stuff was built that way. And then stuccoed. Again, the post office in the museum was stuccoed later, so the stucco itself is cracking, coming off, because it was made from material right from where they were. And part of what you guys all learned yesterday was the mining camps and the ag camps and cattle camps. Their nighttime cabins were made of whatever was there, and then tore down and relocated to the next camp. So go ahead and wander a little bit.
Linda?
Something I think is pretty unique is, I always thought that tree was here, but it wasn't. It was brought in. Not sure why they brought it in, but it makes a great picture.
Linda,
Yeah.
do you know where Joel McCrae's double lived here? He lived here close, in this area. Do you remember?
What year?
Oh, probably in the 40s. But his Joel McCrae double was here, someplace real.
Don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's interesting. You would have enjoyed that.
I would be. Yeah, she died early on.
She must have.
She
On
was
the
an
Arlemont?
older lady, but died early on.
Yeah, because my father-in-law in Bishop remembers coming over there to get something. I can't imagine. Came to get hay, but it's probably when they had a dairy in Bishop and didn't have their own hay, because they used to come here to get it. And he said that she had about 15 dogs, and they all slept in the house with her.
Lots of dogs.
Yeah,
One of
That's on the Arlemont?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the stories that we heard is that it was the dogs that turned on her and killed her.
Well, that
could be folklore.
so this house was what? Who was the designer of this house?
The designer was, well, I don't know who the designer was. It's a craftsman style house.
Craftsman style.
Yeah.
And then the other one's Frank Lloyd Wright. Now that's in Fish Lake Valley.
I know.
That's
Tiny little valley.
yeah, a tiny little valley with all of this.
Did you want to get up close to the wall?
No.
Oh, okay.
I got close enough. It was good.
Actually, you could walk in there and see the arena if that interests you, but yeah.
It's not that. I've never been bad in my legs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, kind of prevents
Where's your
me.
vehicle? Right here? Okay, good.
Yeah.
You carry a big stick.
Yeah. There you stand. You don't say anything about it.
We
Yeah.
have
Okay.
a migration.
Yeah, they in the 80s I was the tribal hunter for the Western Shoshone here. Hank actually they found out they were going to run him off his little acre of ground down there and threw dirt in his face and told him that was their dirt, not his dirt, and they were going to shove his house over. He went over and got a lawyer. They found out that no, 1 inch of Fish Lake Valley had been legally treated for, and so they gave him hunting rights, and he made me his tribal hunter.
Look.
Yeah. Yeah. A drone.
It's a drone.
Yeah.
That's the biggest drone I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Well, who sent that?
One of the guys.
In the group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just as long as it doesn't shoot or hurt us, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. You gave me something that I wanted to know.
Let's see. Get on there. Is any recording or not?
I think I'm not sure if she's not going to walk.
This is the bunkhouse, I guess, for the Patterson Ranch.
We went over there because of the bee's nest.
Oh, bees?
Yes.
Okay.
There's some serious beehives over there.
These are the very old apple trees in the Patterson Ranch. Hank Patterson got his name from these people. His name was Butterfield. And there's a ranch. That's a custom home. By the way, Hank Patterson took his name from these people. He had a,
We gotta get a stick.
his name was Butterfield.
Butterfield.
Yeah. And he called him Butterfield because he was always looking for the Butterfield stage.
Oh.
And his mother called him
We were looking
Butterfield.
for an apple, but we're afraid to go in there.
I can go in here, Carol. I'll get you an apple.
There's
you don't
apples
need to
right
go in
there.
There's an apple
Yeah.
tree right here. I can get you apple trees. Look at the little, yeah, look at the little egg.
Yeah.
Look at that.
The birds.
Yeah.
Sure she is.
didn't know that you were.
She's talking to Sharon.
I didn't see you.
Oh, there's nice apples on those trees.
So this is creek water coming down.
Could they see the house of it too?
It would have.
Linda, did you know the name of the story about Hank Patterson? How he got his name?
I didn't hear that. Well, I probably did when I was a kid. He's
Well,
the one he.
His name was Butterfield.
Oh.
That Hank's real name was Butterfield because he's always looking for the Butterfield stage.
Oh.
And they named him Butterfield, but after he went to work for the Pattersons, they had to have him. They had Social Security. They gave him the name of Hank Patterson or Henry Patterson from these people here.
He's the one that made my medicine pouch for me when I was 10.
Yeah, I have.
So it's a blessed
Yeah.
pouch.
Oh yes. Hank gave the watch fob that his mother made for him in 1913 on a Shoshone rose. I have that he gave to me that his mother had given to him in 1913.
Wow. What a blessing is
Yeah,
that?
that was something.
So, okay.
When he made me his tribal hunter, he gave that to me.
Did you say your father? Oh, your screen. Was it? He went with who was it?
He was-
Ginger Rogers. Who was the one he stole her car?
Oh, that was Betty Davis.
Betty Davis.
He stole the Betty Davis's car. He just borrowed it.
Okay.
Yeah, my father did.
Yeah, your father.
Yeah,
So it was Betty Davis.
yeah, it was Betty Davis.
I'm gonna remember that.
He was
Stuff on the roof. It's just a shame. You think they can to be wonderful to restore it?
Watching everybody step over that stuff, I was like, yeah, that's probably not a great idea.
Okay,
the other home down there on the Arlemont Ranch is a Frank Lloyd Wright home.
Oh, yeah?
That's something else.
Yeah.
My sister's husband's mother and father managed the Arlemont Ranch in the way back when.
Wow.
No, kill them all.
I was wondering at what point there's a soul there.
Beautiful home, huh? Yeah. Like my home down on the Snow Goose Ranch, it's this abandoned just like this. That's the first home I ever lived in.
It's always sad to see houses not lived in.
She said it didn't think it'd been lived in for 30 years. Where was a wood stove? Had to have one. One time.
Honest to God, I've seen worse that people are living in today.
Yeah. Wish I'd move this thing up on the creek.
Yeah, Susan, you might want to just... There's some flat rocks around the tree.
Walk around porches.
Wow.
Walk around porch.
Yeah.
That was what they did. They slept out on the porches in the summertime.
Not having none of the lunch.
Nice.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
I ought to move this one up on the creek.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, it's gorgeous, isn't
Oh, it's beautiful. There's another beehive.
I know. I just, the warmer it gets outside.
Now that was a cow barn right there.
Different than when you were here.
Well, I lived right over there.
Uh-huh.
That was a cow barn there. They had showers and everything. That's where his champion bulls and stuff were in that area. And this was a horse barn. This is what I was over here.
And I bet you, this is
It
a
was
whole lot different
spick
than
and span.
Yeah.
This place
is a
was
whole lot
spick and
different
span.
When my great whoever grandmother was here, because hers was the little rock house.
Yeah, that was the courthouse is up there. We went by it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my territory right there. I had to keep that thing spick and span. And brush all the horses and get them ready and exercise them. If I remember right, I think that was the recreation hall back there. Or this one was, one or the other. Can't remember
So
now.
is the loading dock?
Yeah, they put that's later though, I think. Cord had a whole bunch of Volkswagen and snub nose pickups and stuff back then.
So this is had many families here. The earliest family that I know of so far are the McAfees, and after that were the Malinis. After that was E.L. Cord, and after that were just people. Just people.
Linda?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, you just weren't listening. So I am going to say one more time with everybody listening, and there will be a test later. Do not disturb the bees. Don't go anywhere where they are, because they have a job to do and it's time for them. It's when it's cold in the morning first thing, that's when you can go mess around places. But this is not cold. Same thing with the rattlesnakes. Right now they're sunning a little bit on the east side, but in another hour, by the time we get to the next location, they're tired of the sun, they're gonna go to the shade. So when you're walking around bushes right now for the next 30 minutes, you probably can walk on the sunny side. On the shady side. So it's just a reverse. And then this afternoon, you're gonna wanna walk on the sunny side because they don't wanna be there. So no bees, no snakes.
I want to tell you all before you start on this tour, this was my grandparents' ranch.
Thank you.
And as you came down the big driveway and you see the trees so close together along there, when my grandmother was 12 years old, her father had this ranch and she was born here. And she and her mother cut trees for posts and put them along the ditch line all along there and put barbed wire on them. The posts grew into trees. So those trees along there that's why they're all so close together. They were fence posts at one time. So those trees are over 100 years old, and sadly I see some of them they won't be with us a whole lot longer. But we always love driving down the driveway and seeing those trees.
So because we're kind of starting off with the earliest, which would be the McAfees, Jenny, is there anything that you want to say about any part of it from the early on settlement? And then I'd like you and Roy to kind of chime in with the next generation of inhabitants. And then I'll take up the lead because this is what I grew up with.
Yeah, well, I don't really know a whole lot except that Grandpa Frederick was one of the bratty littlest kids. And he didn't have much to do with putting together the homestead. He ran off and played with the Paiute Indian buddies, but the older children and Sophronia, some of the walls of the home is still here, and
The rock wall, yeah.
the rock wall, yes.
And this is also where we were told early on, and Susan, I think, brought a photo album one year and showed that Sophronia was buried under one of the apple trees. And of course, we all combed all the apple trees, couldn't find anything. but we did find part of her headstone in the dump because back then things were really overgrown when the next people came through, and they were disking and plowing and cleaning things up and taking big, you just saw the big front end loader go by. That's a lot of product to put in there. It's not that they were purposely trying to destroy a headstone. We found parts of it, and it is in the museum. Just this morning, Marlene told me that her grandmother,
My grandmother's mother was buried right about the same spot. And when they sold the ranch to Cord, the one stipulation on the agreement was that the headstone never be moved. And as I remember it, it wasn't a tall one. It was a flat one on the ground. And somebody told me they found it in the cemetery years later, and it's not here. I've looked at a billion times. It isn't here anymore. And Mr. Cord told the family when we asked about it that it was not too far out of his wife's bedroom window, and she could see it, and it upset her. So they took it away.
so it's real possible in the museum there are the big chunky parts of the granite, and then there's two pieces of flat granite. I think it might be
It might be my
her
great-grandmother.
great-grandmother's, because the two would not have gone together, but they were all in the same area that we found them.
Did geologists determine it was from the same rock?
I don't know, because usually granite is not around here, so it'll come from a stone quarry somewhere out of this area.
Each stone would have been separate.
Separate, yeah.
Oh, you can look at it. You can look at it and tell it's separate. That's why I kind of have them separated, because even me can tell. So yeah.
Well, one of my favorite other stories to tell is that when my grandmother's father decided to sell this ranch, he was tired of being in Fish Lake Valley. He wanted to go over to Bishop, and he did go to Bishop and build the Valley View Hotel. However, my Malini grandparents, my grandfather and his brother lived in Candelaria. Their dad had a saloon over there, and they were Teamsters. And they came through this valley a lot. And when they saw the for sale sign, they knew they wanted to buy this place. So they came in and bought it from George Leidy. And my grandmother's favorite story, and my grandmother and my grandfather were married shortly thereafter. And my grandmother's favorite story is that she went with the ranch.
Now, can you tell me how you're related
To,
to
well, I'm the 5th generation.
On what side?
On the Leidy side.
So who was Sophronia, and then which child after that?
You know, I think it was Grace, but I am not sure. I have to look back at my records to see.
We're Grace.
We're great.
Because you're Grace.
So it's
Well, wherever George Leidy came from, that was my grandmother's father. So whichever one he came from one of those original ones. It's 5 generations back, so I just can't follow it.
I'm 4 generations, and he's 4 generations
Right,
from Grace.
from Grace.
And one of the sisters of Grace was a Leidy.
May? Was that May?
No,
Yeah, married a lady.
she's from May.
Well, I'm only 2 generations.
Yeah, there was that's another May. My May was
see, I'm-
named for her.
So
No, I'm only 2 generations from Grace. Like you. And so is Ken.
Yeah, you're only, what, 3 generations from Saffronia?
Right.
No,
Sophronia is our great-grandmother.
Sophronia is.
Great-grandmother, yeah.
Yeah.
so this
I'm
is
5
really
generations from her.
The Leidies didn't live down there by the lake for a while?
Yep.
Somebody lived down there by the lake, part of the Mac
That's
family.
the original
One of the Leidy.
buildings. I'm George Leidy. I'm 5th generation. George Wilson Leidy came out from Iowa. His father was a 49er. He went back to Iowa to stand it. But George came out in 1870. He was a freighter, like a lot of people, all into Bellevue and Candelaria. And in 1880, he bought where those old basalt rock houses are on over where the original lake was, falling down now. He bought it from a doctor from Candelaria named Marriott. who later moved to Oregon someplace, and started his, his family. And then he married Emily McAfee.
Okay, that's how we find out.
And she had her own place, which I believe was right up by the creek. And so they ended up moving up here to where Ford's house is. They built their own house. I've got some photographs of what it looked like inside and out.
And when we get
And
up
if
there,
people want to
let's
look, let me
show
know.
you
I know
look
you're
at that.
standing in the sun. You want to get out of the sun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll keep it short. I can answer questions later on.
Yeah, he knows the lineage better than I do because he knows that.
So when we get up there, let's have you share that part of it in the shade because a lot of us
Yeah.
can't be in the sun very long.
Yeah.
So I just want to give you a quick overview then. E.L. Cord is the one who built most of this stuff. Mrs. Cord was the person who cracked the whip on everybody who worked for her, including me. I was their nanny. To have everything to where a human could eat off the floors of the dairy. There was a dairy here, and they bottled their own milk, and we found shards of the bottles in the dump. So if any of you ever come across a Circle L with a red Hereford cow on it, or Holstein, I'm sorry, cow on it, tell me so I can buy it. It'll cost around anywhere from $200 to $500, but I want one for the museum. And they're very rare. So anyway, I do have the Circle L grate out of the dairy. I was given one of their brands, and my brother was given that pretty ore wagon that's in my museum. So they wanted this ranch to be pristine. This is how we grew up with it, those of us in that generation, being a show ranch. And so the new owner now is trying to revive what he can. Of course, you always have, just like that Angus McAfee ranch, you have to start with the production first. Where you live is of no matter. If you don't have crops to sustain you, then you're not going to be there anyway. So it's no different today with the big corporations. The crops have to pay for everything. So little by little, they are starting on the main Cord house now. Inside, the outside still looks the same. And they are going inside the buildings and trying to restore them enough because they're structurally very sound. So Mr. Cord came in here in the late 30s, and Marlene and I were talking about when the Leidies and Malini McAfees were here. And so that's part of the puzzle that all of you who have your lineage drawn out, where if you can send that to me on a thumb drive or email it to me in a file, then I can start helping to connect some of the dots from all of you guys. All right, yeah.
When has this been abandoned then?
It's not abandoned. It just looks that way.
When
This was bought.
They sold it in 1940 to Cord for $50,000. And there was several hundred acres of property
Yeah.
irrigated. It was a cattle ranch back then.
Yeah, it was cattle and dairy.
50,000. Now it's,
Oh,
if you
dairy
bought it
now,
today, it'd be worth several millions, I'm sure.
Oh, actually, it's sold in the worst condition of what you see now for about 12 times that. Yeah, yeah.
Well, we should get out.
So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull way up past the house,
12 times.
and if everybody will snug to the right, because as you can tell, we still have front-end loaders moving hay. And then that way we can kind of walk out over by the rock wall.
Linda, when I worked here, that was my building that I took
Your
care
job.
of. And the horses had showers and the cattle
I
had
know.
showers.
Like I said, you could eat off the
Oh yeah, there wasn't a leaf on the ground.
I know. And everything was painted pristine white.
Yes.
Mrs. Ford had everything painted white. All the buildings, everything. just start off and then let Marlene and Roy, well, I keep calling you Roy, but anyway.
I go by Roy.
I know.
My name's George.
So, Mr. Cord, when he bought the house, it was more of a summer home, and Mrs. Cord, when they would come here throughout the year, it would be family gatherings, similar to this. They did it a little more often, but the kids would come from everywhere, bring all their kids, and she raised Arabians. And so there was a huge corral on the other side of the orchard. It might still be there. But she wanted this to be a showplace. And so everything every year had to be scrubbed down all year long, especially when they knew she was coming. And painted white. All the fence posts, every building, everything was painted white. And in the house, and Marlene will be able to share a lot more about some of the other stuff that she was telling me this morning, but they, as a kid and as their nanny, it was always fun for me. This was a fun adventure park for me. Being able to take care of their little ones, but enjoy the movie theater, the built-in movie theater, the soda fountain. Every bedroom had 4 post pedestal beds. Very Victorian looking, nothing like common basic farmhouse style. Floors were very rich adobes, and they had a staff that wouldn't quit. Marlene will say some of the staff that she remembers. And so then, unfortunately, when Mr. Cord sold, it was sold to a gentleman. His name was Don Hatfield, and he started letting the ranch go down. He had it it actually went into bankruptcy, and then Jim Boyce bought it, and it would have been better to go into bankruptcy, because he basically stripped it to put it to the Petaluma cheese factory. So whatever profits were made here went for his business venture in Petaluma. Great cheese factory though. So Brad Brown et al. And group bought it for several $1 million and have started bringing the fields back. Luckily started irrigating again. Unfortunately, the rotary along the highway that Marlene was talking about that were actually fence posts and became trees. You know, they're over 100 years old, and poplars don't last usually more than 30, 40 years. So they've had a great life, and there's not a lot that they can do to save them. They do flood irrigate it, but that's just not ever going to be enough. So I'm going to turn it over and let you guys.
Well, Roy probably knows something that I don't know. Something I can share with you is that when this place was sold, it broke my father's heart. He and his brother wanted this place. They grew up here. My dad wasn't born here because my grandmother May did not want to have a child here, so she went to Bishop, and he was born in Independence in a place called somebody's maternity home. I think it's a rest home now. I've been past it, but it's been a while since I've been there. But she went there to have my dad because she didn't want to have him in Tonopah, and she didn't want to have him here on the ranch. But he grew up here on the ranch, and so did his brother and sister, and they loved this place. And when my grandmother was very tired of she was born here, raised here, married here. My grandfather was a state senator for 2 terms in the Nevada State Senate, and they would go to Reno in the wintertime to be at the Senate meetings. And my grandmother loved Reno. It was very different from the Fish Lake Valley. And at one time she was the postmistress here. At one time they had a store on the property. So she's a very busy woman. They had lots of the local Indians that were their hired hands, and my grandmother cooked for them. My mother said she never did any housekeeping. The Indians came in and cleaned the house. But my grandmother worked in the gardens, and a lot of the fruit trees you see out there, my grandmother planted. And so after they sold it, my aunt on my mother's side of the family was a cook at the Chattovich Ranch. So I still came back and forth to visit my aunt, and of course came down here. And Coors at that time had a Chinese cook. And none of us, even though we were Molinis, were allowed in the main house. But we could go in the kitchen. And the kitchen was absolutely modern to a T and immaculate. And there was a soda fountain in there. So as children, we could go in there and the Chinese cook would fix us stuff from the soda fountain. It was real fun. And my aunt, who was a cook, learned how to fix pork fried rice from the Chinese cook. So I did have some later year memories of Cor being here and the fancy house. But it was painful for my father. I think he hardly ever came back he came back to the valley often. He became a very good friend of Linda's, and for some reason felt a real strong affinity with Linda and shared lots of stories with Linda that he didn't share with me. And so we managed to keep in touch. And I never miss a trip that I don't come down here. And we were here on the last tour, and nobody was here. It was again a 4th of July weekend, and all the hired hands were gone. And the apple trees out in the orchard were loaded with apples. And I took a sack and I went out there to pick apples. And my daughter said, "What are you doing?" I said, "My grandmother planted these trees. I'm picking these apples." And I went home and I made 12 quarts of apple butter. And I'm just finishing them. So I don't know if I have enough nerve to go pick apples today.
Well, we're going to walk around that side, so don't anybody say anything. Incidentally, Jeffrey is the son of the trustees who have this. It's a joint venture ownership with Brad Brown and the old White Mountain Ranch trustee. So Jeffrey is their son, and he's the ranch manager. He's in church right now. I didn't know we were having cowboy church until last night. Couldn't get word to him. But they're very welcoming to all of us as long as we just honor, which I said, yeah, like we're not going to. But he also told me that they have found a lot of furniture from different places, and they want me to come through and look at it and see what, if any of it, could be anything I remember from being a kid, and if so, I can have it for the museum. So I'm pretty excited about that. Great. Roy, you're up.
Well, I won't take too much time. I have a number of sheets of photographs that were taken in and around this place, including the founder of the ranch, George Wilson Lighty. Here's the original ranch house before Cord took it down. And then there's pictures of the interior of the house as well. And I wanted to shake it.
Do you want your stick?
I had to put my stick down.
Well, I can give you your stick. Yeah.
Right behind
Here, I got an extra one.
There's on the ground in the ground.
Oh, I see.
Thank you. Sorry, folks.
You're welcome.
Oh, that's good.
You want me to hold these, actually? And you
Yeah,
take
and I
one at
wanted
a
you
time?
guys, both of you, to look.
I'll hold.
Isn't that the rock wall behind the house? Where those dogs are?
Yeah, it could be. You take
But
the
if people
first
want
picture.
to, take a look at some of the ranch life, the people that were here, what it looked like back at the turn of the last century, go ahead. Just
Actually,
the
you know,
last
I think-
person can bring them back.
So
to me.
when was the ranch actually founded? What year?
This one, 1880, when George Wilson Lighty bought it from. Well, he bought that 160 acres down by where the lake used to be, where the basalt buildings are, and that was a Dr. Malott. And he was a miner and a doctor. He didn't do anything. He somehow acquired that property before he moved out of the Candelaria.
So how did the McAfees, because we were always told the McAfees were behind the Molini and behind that, all of that rubble. So would that have been
Melissa McAfee married George Wilson Lighty.
Right.
Okay.
And
So
that's
that's
how
my
that, she had a
great-grandmother.
place
And what
called the
year was that?
Desert
My
Garden
great-grandmother-
Ranch.
My great-great-grandmother
Yeah.
was a McAfee.
And
And
what
she
year
married
was
George
that?
Lighty.
Oh, 1885 about. I have to look it
Okay.
up.
When
But the
Christopher Columbus
McAfee
founded-
family was here back in the 1860s. They were here very
Yeah,
early on.
because I was going to say the Maud
Hang-
McNett, I've got the original deed that Beulah Stewart left last time that's dated 1858. So I'm pretty sure
We have a deed, you know, that Sophronia made out in 1874, I believe, which is in the courthouse in Goldfield.
Okay,
I have a copy of that.
I'll have to go over there.
I
So,
had a,
yeah,
I had a
think-
map, topo map that shows the original ranch, Emma Melissa's property, which is up here by the road, the original McAfee property. They weren't very big in those days,
Right,
but over
right.
years they got bigger as they acquired additional land. But there's some interesting pictures, and if people
So,
want to look at them,
I
that's
think
great.
I'm gonna maybe concur with Roy that the one picture with the triangular doghouse.
like, see, there's a
If you
notch
look,
there.
yeah, well, it's a window,
Is that a window?
and there is a notch in part of the rock wall back there. So it's very possible that that's it.
Well, I think
So-
between all of us, we'll figure out, I know who most of these folks are, they're just not labeled right now. We'll figure out who some of the other ones are as we compare notes.
Good. Roy and I are
So
going to get
here's the
together.
thought of what we can do is, so that we're not all standing for people, is go ahead and circle on around, and then I would
Why don't
like
you
it
hang
if,
on to
I'll hang on
these?
to these, and I'd like it if we put it out when we all get back, because I figure we should be back there.
There's a great picture of Candelaria, 1902,
Oh,
Main
nice.
Street.
Yeah,
Freight wagons and all
yeah,
the
where
buildings
my
were there. And
my Malini
So
grandparents.
we have the Chatovich Ranch after this one. Does anyone want to go down to the cemetery? If not, then I know most of us have been there many, many, many times. But
I will eventually be
if
there at the
someone
cemetery.
hasn't been there, I can always take a
Or you're
smaller
gonna be there?
Yeah, my wife and I.
Yeah.
We have a plot there in the cemetery.
I haven't been there, but if it's just me, I can go with
that's a Smith Ranch across the
It's
street,
interesting.
Yeah,
we think.
okay, I'm done talking.
So what we might do, let's go ahead and walk on around the back side of this. Marlene, don't leave.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then maybe what we'll do is we will go on to the Chatovich Ranch after this ranch, and on our way back, anybody who wants to go to the cemetery, I will turn off on the cemetery road and I will wait. So anybody who wants to come will go there. All right. It doesn't. It just has a sign that says Mineral Ridge,
Yeah,
which is a mine.
This was my workplace in 60 and 61.
And what did you do?
I was over that, I was a horse trainer. I was over the horse barn. It had showers in there. You put raincoats on and went in there and washed the horses. And the cow barn was the same way with these registered Hereford bulls in there.
I want that. Okay. Now the Wyoming ranch, where they brought Herefords in from Scotland.
Yes.
And we have a statue of their prized bull.
Yes.
That we got from the ranch.
Boy, this place was beautiful. You saw it, I think, when it was in its prime.
No, I never
Were you?
saw it in the prime.
Oh boy, I lived here in the prime.
I haven't seen it. I just started seeing it in 2004. That
Oh,
was,
okay. Yeah, it was
Maybe.
thrashed by then.
yeah, or maybe even 2005.
Yeah.
The first year here, we couldn't find any McAfee anything. We had a hard time.
Sprinkler's turning.
Here comes the sprinkler. Watch out.
Watch out, watch out.
Here it comes.
Be refreshing.
Cold.
The coldest water coming out of the ground was on the Snow Goose Ranch. It was below freezing.
Oh, that was cool.
Ice would come out.
What was
What
your
is it?
first name?
Jim Phillips.
Jim.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was Jimmy Remling when I was here.
Jim. Okay.
I took my dad. Yeah.
Mention you. That's your name.
I don't know.
Well, that had to be the original rock wall.
So this is the kind of rock wall I was telling you. Toss a little something, a stick or something up against it. Because the snakes could be sunbathing themselves.
They don't take sunbathing.
Yeah. And now we're in the orchard as well. And here is the window.
Poor placement for a tree.
This is a Cord mansion. This is where E.L. Cord and Virginia Cord lived. This was her show place.
Hard to know that.
Enlarge the picture and look at the
Yeah.
that window there by the rock wall.
Yeah.
Linda, are they people that bought it aren't living in the house?
Yes, they are.
Oh,
You know, Virginia Cord used to call me and ask me about her horses all the way up in the 80s. They asked me how her horses were doing, if there was any of them still on this ranch.
I know.
I wonder if this is inside. Who would this be? I wonder. There's people sitting inside this
I know,
house.
I wonder that too. Look at the photograph in the background. Nope.
Well, that's
Is that,
Sophronia.
it is Sophronia, yeah.
That's a picture of Sophronia on the wall.
This big
Oh, that's
tree.
cool.
We'll look on your shoulder here and take
That's loud.
video of that.
I bet you that's loud.
Oh yes. Boy, these old devices, they're still down on the Arlemont Ranch, the Chattovich Ranch. They still got some of those out there. Back even in the 80s and almost 90s, Mrs. Cord used to call me and ask me how her horses were, if they were taking care of them or whatever happened to them.
wow.
She got my phone number somehow and would call me about once a month.
Did you get what
Yeah, I
you
got it.
wanted there?
I was a horseman on this ranch.
Okay, let's show this to Gloria. Where's she?
Gloria's right there.
Gloria? She's trying to get that one. Do we recognize anybody in there except Sophronia's picture?
Let me pick it up so I can see it better.
This is
And she looked at this one already, if you want to look at that.
This is Sestonia's picture?
Yeah, on
Yeah.
the wall.
this is,
Yeah.
I think this is Ken McAfee on his horse's cord.
That
Well,
is
if I
neat.
had a magnifying glass, I might.
Wait with me.
That's Sophronia's picture on the wall.
Wow.
Here's another one of the same thing. That's I think is loud.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, but we don't know who the people are.
Yeah.
Wouldn't this
sure.
one be beautiful, just being enlarged?
Is that
Is that the one? Is that, yeah, that's so funny. Is that the picture you have, you and Susan?
look at the wall on the wall.
Oh, I know. Everything. Top notch. For that day. For that day. Yeah. We'd be turning over right now. That's right.
There's a big fruit orchard out there. One of the richest men in the world and most famous man, the man that built the Duesenbergs, the Auburn and the Cord automobile right here. And the last automobile that he built, Cord, was in a false wall in the airplane hangar of this ranch. There were 3 fireplaces in the Cord Mansion. There's where they loaded the firewood in. We're inside in the house. There's a basement under the house also. Quite a difference than where I lived here in 1960 and 61. But it's still quite a mansion.
Back as well.
That's a new super crop out there, hemp. That's high dollar.
Check and see who all wants it.
Yeah, we want to do the
Well, you know, maybe what I'll
That's all hemp. Cannabis. Many acres of it out there, of cannabis. Well, they use it for medical marijuana or for hemp, or what do they use it for? Or the oil? I do not know, but that makes money. That's the Cord Ranch.
Okay. Oh, you have to back up.
No.
Oh,
No,
there's
I'm
one
not.
here. Wait, just a minute. I got it.
But I don't want you telling me it's on your website.
It's on my website.
I'm not.
That's the
gonna stand for
Frank
that.
Lloyd Wright house right there.
Right. So this is the first house
Yeah.
and the oldest house. And the only picture we have in the museum is of John Chadovich. The Chadoviches, there are a lot of graves in Silver Peak and as far north as Mound House and as far south as Las Vegas. So they were kind of everywhere. Not much known that I know. I can't say that we ever had anybody come to any of the reunions, but if I have anything on them, it's a very small amount.
I still send out invitations, but
And hopefully we'll be able to get some information.
can you tell me where do the Chadoviches hail from? I don't
Yeah.
know what Chadovich, is that a European? Where they come from? Is it
don't
Czech?
know.
Is it, what is it?
Sounds Slavic.
Slavic? Yeah.
But I know the creek was named by
Yeah,
them
yes.
as well. And John Davis lived at the top of Davis Canyon, which is off of Chadovich, and he married a Native American. And there is a set of graves up on the mountain there, but too far from the Davis Ranch. But I had University of Kansas come and do a ground resonance imaging, and there are 5 graves. Somebody had asked me if that was a possibility. Well, I've already done it on that. So one of the graves was a very large person, and then there were 2 children graves and 3 adult. So that's 6. So anyway, Jim remembers that this was a
Frank Lloyd Wright house.
So
When Tim Brown sold that to Bob Bender, he gave the plans, the Frank Lloyd Wright plans, to that house.
wow. Well, I'm hoping that this new owner. It is a brand new owner. They've only taken ownership over the last 6 months. They're out of Bakersfield, and they are potato.
Yeah, the
growers.
Tasteful Selections. That are their potatoes.
Oh, okay.
So you have them in, that's the potatoes right there.
Okay, so that's in
Those
our
are Tasteful
groceries now.
Selections.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
They are very, very pro-preservation of history.
That's
They
good.
have assured me that that house won't be torn down, the post office won't be torn down.
Do you get the sign?
Is that
Do I get the sign?
The post office is that little brown building over there.
We're gonna go see.
Yeah, and you know,
right there?
Probably not.
Right, no,
Because they'll keep
right
it
over that
on
way.
time. It needs
That
to
way,
stay where it
the
is.
post boxes are still in
We
there.
have the
Oh, okay.
499, which is the Angus McAfee sign.
good.
So you can wander over here. They're not running potato pickers and diggers today, so you can wander over there. Please don't go up on the porch or anything because people are living there. Just stand, by the wagon. And these are wagons from the era of when John Chadovich was here.
That was their house, right? I was back in the back, couldn't hear.
I'm assuming. I can't say yes, but
Now, that's a Wright house.
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Are these folks
No, that's
planning on restoring it?
My wife talked to Mrs. Bender, and she said that they might restore that house. And Tim Brown told me that they had given the plans from Frank Lloyd Wright plans to them to do that. Tim lived over there. He lived in this house and raised his kids here a long time ago.
I don't think so.
There's the old smokehouse and storehouse over there.
When did the original, the Chadoviches, leave the area?
I couldn't tell you that. I just know that that one of them, Asa Wild's wife, which was supposed to be in Shoshone, married a Chadovich. When he was killed, she married a Chadovich, and then she married into the whatever Chadovich it was. I don't remember which one. I don't know whether Linda knows that. Linda, did you know that Indian woman that Chadovich married was Asa Wild's ex-wife, his widow?
I actually heard that story, and it is in the Unsung Heroes book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, when he got shot, then she got married to
Chadovich.
Well, I thought it was Davis.
Oh, it was Davis.
Yeah.
It was Davis. It was Davis. That was Davis. I apologize.
I mean, just the fact that it's still standing. Yes, it is.
Have to get in the shade, see if this thing's working. Anyway, that's the Frank Lloyd Wright house. Anyway, this is the Frank Lloyd Wright house. And the old smokehouse over there. Just about out of battery, I think.
That found her at her residence, and she had been mauled by her dogs, and when people were saying, oh my gosh, you mean they turned him? Well, what she had done all their lives, the dogs' lives, was she would go out and kill rabbits, shoot rabbits, and feed them raw meats. But as her times got tougher, she wasn't able to provide that fresh meat. And wolves are wolves; they'll revert back to nature. And that she was mauled by them, and they found her dead.
That was Kellogg.
Mrs.
Kellogg, yeah.
We're determining right now, and Susan Haas has some of that information,
I've tried to find a lot on Louise Kellogg because that was the name we were given, and now we're not sure it was Louise. But the Kellogg that was here was the original matriarch of the Kellogg
cereal
factory.
Yeah.
But she didn't like being on the East Coast. She didn't like being in, you know, all of the mix of highfalutin stuff, and came out here. And one of the other stories that I had heard was that she would go trade horses with Deep Springs College. And so she would take a team of horses by herself with her little, you know, rifle and 6-shooter and head. Now from here, we're 15 miles, and then Deep Springs is another 11 miles, so 26 miles. And she would go over the mountain, so over Wyman Canyon, Silver Canyon, drop down. There was, and I don't, his name is in the history of Deep Springs, an Indian male
Harry?
scout.
Harry?
Was it Harry?
Harry?
Oh, because
Harry, and Harry.
Harry was on this side.
No, the Western Shoshone goes to...
I know, but
Yeah.
I thought Harry lived
No,
at
he
the
lived
Kennedy
in Deep
area.
Springs.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
well that clarifies
Yeah,
that.
he was Paiute.
She would get over there, make her trade, and he would follow her at a distance to make sure she got back over the mountain down into the valley. Because those were times when we still had a lot of issues out here.
That big house over there used to be the cookhouse. And
Oh, yeah?
And my mother's...
The one over there, not this one.
Yeah, this one
Yeah.
over here. And my mother's sister was the cook here for a long time. And they lived in the half on this side. My aunt, my uncle, Jack Chadovich, who worked on the ranch, and their baby daughter. And in a one room, this always amazes me, one room with a bathroom, and she cooked in the other side, which was equally as large with long tables for the men to eat at and all the cooking. And I used to come spend summers and help her cook.
So I need his name, your uncle, because you just, and how to contact anybody in his family in order to get some Chadovich information.
I'll get it for you from Janice and Jackie and Barbara. That's the 3 kids of Stanley's.
Yeah, we'd sure love to have them join us.
Well, I'll have to tell them. I thought they came one time.
They did one time.
Yeah, I remember when they were here one time.
They did
when
one
it was
time.
just Jackie and Janet and the oldest one, Jackie and Janet. They went to Barbara. They went
That's the Chadovich post office there. And I looked up there and I saw that 19 on there. I had post office box 19 in Fish Lake Valley for probably 35 or 40 years. I think if you look inside, you can still see the little things.
Yes. Everything's still there.
Find my camera.
Can't see through it anymore. But that barn is something else down there.
Yes, that's a great barn.
This is Armont. This is an unusual built barn. I don't know whether this is a Frank Lloyd Wright barn or what it is. It is unusual the way it's built. Both of these. The boards do not go horizontally, go at a slant. For some reason. I don't know whether they were clapboard barns, and so is this one. quite a barn. Still have plenty of horses, run the cattle. There you can see the way that barn is built. This had to be flank right or something. I've never seen anything like this in my life before. That just about had to be Frank Lloyd Wright, didn't it?
I've heard of him. I never have been interested in architecture, or I'm pretty, I guess, pretty shallow in my. But I just know this is just the most unusual.
Well, when Tim Brown bought it, they got the blueprints for that house and the barns, I guess. Because this is unusual.
Well, he got the blueprints for the barn too, huh?
I guess. They got the blueprints that went wrong with the house and everything, and then Bender, when Mr. Bender bought it, he also was handed down the blueprints.